Hello everyone, welcome to SS Multimedia. This is Harshita Shishala, and in this lesson we'll be learning the properties of multiplication. The objective of today's lesson is learning and understanding the four multiplicative properties. Let's get started. Okay, so the first property of multiplication that we'll be learning or looking at is the associative property of multiplication. So the associative property of multiplication states that the product of three or more digits stay the same even if they are grouped differently. So even if they have parentheses at different places, the product will stay the same. So for example, I'm going to use variables. So variables are any any alphabets. Okay, so let's say there's A times B times C, and the parentheses are around B and C. We can change this too. So the parentheses can be around A and B, and the product will stay the same. Okay, so let's try this with numbers. So what if there's like 25 times 3 times 4? Okay, and I'm gonna put parentheses around 3 and 4. So this might look complicated in the beginning or hard to do because you do 25 times 12 and you have to multiply two-digit numbers. But you can group it differently to make it easier. We can do 25 times 4, there in the parentheses, times 3. This will make it much easier. So 25 times 4 is 100, and 100 times 3 is 300. You can see we can do this in our head too, but this 25 times 12, we would need a piece of paper. But 25 times 12 is still 300. I can even show it to you. 25 and then 12. So 2 times 5, 10. 2 times 2, 4, plus 1, 5. And then 1 times 5, 5. 1 times 2, 2. So you add both of these. So 0 plus 0 is 0. 5 plus 5 is 10. 2 plus 1 is 3. We get the same answer, it's just they're grouped differently. The parentheses are around different numbers. Okay, so let's go to the next property. So the next property of multiplication is the commutative property of multiplication. The commutative property of multiplication states that even if you change the order of numbers, the product remains the same. So for example, we have A times B. That equals to B times A. The product doesn't change. It remains the same. It's just we're just switching the numbers around. So this goes here and this comes here. Okay, so let's try this with numbers to prove that it's actually right, or to see if this is actually right. So let's start off with a simple number. 3 times 2. So what is 3 times 2? Well, that is 6. What is 2 times, and then now let's switch around. So 2 times 3. What is 2 times 3? Well, that is 6 too. So even if we switch the numbers around from here to here, the product stays the same. Okay? The answer doesn't change at all. Let's do another example. So if there is 7 times 8. So 7 times 8 is 56. What is 8 times 7? Well, 8 times 7 is 56 too. So again, the product still stays the same even if you switch numbers around. So basically, 3 times 2 equals 2 times 3. 7 times 8 equals 8 times 7. And this is true for all numbers. Okay? It's true for every property of multiplication, or all numbers. Let's look at another property of multiplication. So the next one is the identity property of multiplication. So the identity property of multiplication states that any number multiplied by 1 will have the same product of the same numbers. So let's say there's A and then we have 1. So a times 1 will result in a. So any number that you multiply by 1, the number will stay the same. Okay, so let's try that out. What about 36 times 1? 36 times 1 is 36. Let's try a smaller number. What about 2 times 1? 2 times 1 is 2. Okay, and what about like a 3-digit number? 356 times 1. It's still 356. So any number you multiply by 1, you'll get the number over here. So the other number, like this number, or like 2 or 36. And now let's do the let's do the other property of multiplication. So the other property of multiplication is the distributive property of multiplication. So what is the distributive property of multiplication? So it states that when you have a sum inside parentheses, then that needs to be multiplied later, so like outside, is the same thing as multiplying the number outside the parentheses and inside. So this might seem a little confusing, but I'll explain it to you. So if we have so the sum inside the parentheses, let's just say a plus b. And the multiplied one, so the multiplied number would be like c. Let's just say that. So if a and b are in parentheses and then c is outside, it is practically what I'm trying to say, or what this explanation is trying to say, is that it's basically the same thing as multiplying c times a and adding it to c times b, and you'll still get the same answer. So let's do an example. Okay, so if we have 2 plus 3 and then times 6. Okay, so if we do 6 times 2 plus 6 times 3, or you know what, let me erase that. Okay, 6 times 2, and then you add it, you'll get the same answer. Let's try it out. So 2 plus 3 is 5, and 6 times 5 equals 30. 6 times 2 is 12. 6 times 3 is 18. What is 18 plus 12? Well, that is 30. So you see 30 plus, I mean 12. So basically these two are the same thing. So you can use this if it's like huge numbers, like for example, you have like 3 and then 54 plus 60 or 62. Then you can use the distributive property to make it easier instead of adding these two and multiplying it by 3. So there are times when you would want to use the distributive property. Let's do another example to make it more clear. So let's say there's 2 times a bigger number. Let's say 12 plus 5 times 3. Okay, so first let's do it using this method. So so let's do it with the parentheses, so not using the distributive property, and then let's use the distributive property and see which one's easier. Okay, so 12 plus 5 would be 17. Now you do 3 times 7. So 17 times 3. 3 times 7 is 21. 3 times 1 is 3. 3 plus 2 is 5. So 51. Or we can do it in another way. So let me change the color quickly. And I'm gonna do it over here. So I'm gonna erase this and let's do it over here. So we can do 12 times 3 plus 5 times 3. So 12 times 3, well, 3 times, so I'll do it here. 12 times 3, 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times 1 is 3, 36. And then 5 times 3 is 15. 36 plus 15 is 51. And we got the answer here too. So I think this method is easier, but you guys decide. Okay? I'm just gonna write easier for me. So that's the last property of multiplication that we're going to learn today. Now it's problem time. So we only have 4 questions here, but what you guys do is pause the video and answer all these questions. So A, B, C, and D. And then unpause once you're done, and I'm going to explain you and I'm going to tell you the right answers and explain how it's the right answer. Okay? I will assume that you paused the video. Let's start off with reading the question. So it's asking, what properties of multiplication are these? So we have 4 different properties of multiplication and we have to find out which one each of them is. So 6 times 7 equals 7 times 6. So I don't remember actually. Let's go and look back. So what is the associative property? So it says that it's A times B. So this is how it is. So like A times, oh, in the parentheses, you just group it. So A times and then in parentheses, B times 7, C is the same thing as A times, in parentheses, A times B outside parentheses times C. Okay, so that is not associative. I mean, that is not our question because our question is 6 times 7 equals 7 times 6. Let's look at the commutative property. So it says that A times B is B times A. Isn't that the same thing as 7 times, let's see, 7 times 8? 6 times 7. So isn't that the same thing as 6? Okay, hold on. Isn't that the same thing as 6 times 7 equals 7 times 6? Well, it is. So, the answer for A is commutative property. Now, let's look at the second question. It says 6 times, in parentheses, 7 times 8 equals 6 times 7, in parentheses, times 8. So, let's see. As we learned that, like as we looked at it in the first question for this one, we went to the associative property and we found out that this is so there's parentheses around B and C and times A, and it's also equal to A times B in parentheses times C. So we find out that it's associative property. Okay, let me just write this quickly. And now let's look at the third one. That is 53 times 1. So we know it's not associative property or commutative property. So let's look at identity property. So what does identity property say? So it says that any number multiplied by 1 will have the product of the same number. So A times 1 equals A. And let's look at it. So is 53 times 1 53? Well, it is. So this is the identity property. Okay, now let's look at the last one. So it says that 6 times, in parentheses, 3 plus 2 equals 6 times 3 plus 6 plus 2. So let's look at the last one, which is the distributive property. And it says that C times, in parentheses, A plus B equals CA plus CB. And can we substitute 6? Okay, so let's substitute this. So 6 times 3 plus 2, okay, equals 6 times 3 plus 6 times 2. Well, it is the same thing. Okay, so that is the distributive property of multiplication. That was all for this lesson, and please comment down below how many answers you got right. Thank you for watching. Like and share this video, and don't forget to subscribe.